Hello and welcome back. Thank you for joining me. It's not death, it's freedom. It's not doom, destruction, decay. It's not oblivion, obliteration. It's freedom. This is the idea that we're going to work with here. And we're working also with the idea that our mind is very powerful. It's much more powerful than we normally give it credit for, which, as you go through these materials here in A Course in Miracles, I hope that this idea becomes more and more prominent to you, that you're more powerful than you could possibly imagine. Time to step into a little of that. Yeah. It's an invitation from our inner teacher. We're in chapter 5, section 5, paragraph 4, just one paragraph's worth of material today here in the text of A Course in Miracles. And as we always find here, there's so much that one could say about a single paragraph of this material that we could spend days, weeks, months, and years on literally the same passage, discussing the same ideas, and the 357th time that you hear the same thing may well be the day where it really lands, right? Where it really lands and connects for you. The title of this section is The Ego's Use of Guilt, and we saw in the last video that the ego is clearly insane. So what are we when we side with it and identify with it? Mistaken, for sure. The ego is simply a mistake, but when we identify with it, we cause ourselves all kinds of grief and heartache, suffering. It's the situation where we find ourselves, where we realize that there's got to be a better way, and we look toward spiritual practice. We look to our inner teacher to show us that way. Because the call is always going out to each and every one of us all the time. It's just that in the past, we have not listened to it. It's up to us to listen to the call, and then it's also up to us to put the guidance, to put the instruction of our inner teacher into practical application, into action. This is where the action lies in spirituality, is in practical application. It is our experience that shows us conclusively that the ideas that we're working with here are true. It's our experience that shows us they're true. We learn this course experientially, which is very powerful. You want something to stick, learn by experience, not simply book knowledge. There's nothing wrong with book knowledge. And in fact, it's important to have some kind of a grasp on the material as you practice it. However, it's not necessary that you fully, completely understand all of these metaphysics. Just start to do the work, start forgiving. The understanding will, in fact, come. We don't have to understand the ideas in the text or the workbook in order to put them into practical application, do we? We don't. It's far more important to gain this experiential understanding. It really is. Because if you merely try to grasp this course on an intellectual level, a couple of things might happen. One is that it may seem deeply confusing. And that would make sense. It does. It makes sense that this material would appear to be confusing because we're not conditioned to think this way. We're conditioned to think we're an ego. We're conditioned to think we're an individual, a human being, a physical body. This thing that you see on your screen, we're conditioned to think this is us, that life is limited to this. And we know that it's far more than that. If you didn't know that deep down, you wouldn't be here watching this. You wouldn't be interested in spirituality, much less in this particular course. That's for sure, right? So let's delve in and study and practice with some emphasis on practice. So, with the ego's use of guilt, we're told here in paragraph 4 something very, very important right here in the first sentence, and that's whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. Whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. You could accept the ego into your mind, or you could accept the peace of God, accept the guidance of your inner teacher, the Holy Spirit, accept truth, accept illusion. When we accept the ego into our mind, we see ourselves as individuals competing with other individuals for these things that we deem to be scarce and finite resources. So we scramble over one another, we go to war with one another, we position ourselves against one another, versus, always in opposition, because we fear that our brother is going to come take our stuff unless we take his first. It's, when you think about it, which we always invite you to do, it's a very warlike attitude. We're constantly in a state of fear when we identify with the ego, and to the point where it becomes what we consider to be our reality, yet it's not real at all. It's not real at all. When we use the present moment to choose differently, to choose our guidance from our inner teacher, to choose love, to choose God, to choose the thought system of the Holy Spirit, instead of the thought system of the ego, it engenders joy. Peace, joy. It's natural. This is our natural state. Peace and joy, limitlessness, boundlessness, happiness. When we choose love, God, truth, we experience this. Now, at first here on the path, we may experience it in just little tiny fragments of time, or so it seems, little moments, and it may be fleeting and will return back to ego clinging and all of the crap that's going on our social media feed, because it's always something. Isn't it? I mean, it's always something. There's always someone out there projecting their own deep-seated unconscious guilt and fear onto everybody. And you may be doing the exact same thing. When we side with the ego, we're thinking unnaturally, completely unnaturally. When we side with God, with our inner teacher's guidance and advice, we're thinking naturally. And the choice is ours. This is a really simple endeavor. Doesn't mean we make it easy for ourselves, but It's not difficult to understand that right now, in the present moment, we have a choice. And that's not. Nor is it difficult to understand that the past is gone and the future is not here. So, why then do we spend the vast majority of our lives pretending that the past is right here, right now, and the future's right here, right now, too? We do everything backwards. What we have is right now, and we have one choice to make: God or the ego, the thought system of the Holy Spirit or the thought system of the ego, light or dark, life or death, truth or illusion, self with a capital S versus self with a lowercase s, individual self-sustaining survival unit, doing pitched battle with everything at all times, and in constant defensive posture from a perceived attack that may never come. Who's ever worried about something that never came to pass? It's a classic example. We're invited not to side with the ego. It's an invitation that goes out to us to listen to the guidance of our inner teacher. When we side with the ego, we're shown here some really, really interesting and very important ideas here in the latter part of this paragraph, paragraph 4. We're looking again at the idea of sin. So let's just be very clear. There is no sin. You may have been raised to believe otherwise. I certainly was. I was part of 2 fundamentalist Christian churches growing up. Long story short, my parents left the first one. I left the second when I got my driver's license and refused to return to Sunday school. So there's a lot more to say about that. But many of us were raised to believe that we're sinners, that we have sinned against God. We have transgressed not only God the Father, but ourselves and each other, and that we're bad, worthy of condemnation, punishment, and blame, death. There is no sin. Perhaps you've felt this and intuited this your whole life. And perhaps not. God has no ego to be offended. The perceived separation, where we think that we've separated from God, has never occurred. This is another way of looking at a well-known passage from the Course that shows up in various forms in many places. Ideas leave not their source, and you are the thought of God. You have never left your source, capital S. Ideas remain in the mind of the thinker. Another way of looking at that. It's the same thing. We are the thought of God. This does mean all of us. There's only one Son of God. There appear to be 8 billion sons of God here in the world. In truth, there's one. Perfect oneness. We've never left our source. There is perfect oneness. In fact, that is the definition of heaven in A Course in Miracles. It's the awareness of perfect oneness. There's no sin. You're not sinner. The ego views sin as real, as a positive act of assault. It sees transgressions as real. You're transgressing your brother, and your brother is transgressing you. You're messing with each other. You can use worse language than that. You get the idea. The ego constantly sees us as opposed to one another. And in truth, we're invited to see the notion of sin as simply when someone transgresses or appears to transgress, because they don't really transgress anything or anyone. When someone acts badly, it's a lack of love. It's a call for love. When we look at true forgiveness here in A Course in Miracles, we're invited to see our brother's egregious behavior, no matter how egregious, as a call for love. We're either extending love or we're issuing a call for love. So when we see our brother's aberrant behavior as a call for love rather than a transgression against us, what then is the natural response? It's to extend love. If we see all of the stuff that goes on in the world as a lack of love, as a call for love, we then extend love. It's the natural response. This is something that we find we need to train the mind to do because we're not conditioned to see it this way. That's why this course makes absolutely no mistake about, no compunction about the fact that it's mind training. We train the mind under the guidance of our inner teacher. We learn to see all of our brother's BS as a call for love. And we extend that love. Forgive. Forgive, forgive, forgive. Keep forgiving. When we do this, we set the ego aside. Part of true forgiveness is a recognition that this separation, this perceived separation, never took place. Your brother's never done anything to you. There are no separate actors. If there's only perfect oneness, you don't have one entity transgressing another. There aren't two, not two, non-dual. There's only perfect oneness. Your brother's never done anything to you. And in practice of this true forgiveness, in extending love, in seeing every negative thing that anyone does as a call for love, in seeing this, we extend love and we set the ego aside. Now, to the ego, this is death. It wants you to be afraid to forgive. It wants you to be afraid of the image on your screen, which is all you're looking at, by the way. It wants you to be afraid of this image on your screen. It wants you to be afraid of the voice that you hear, which is not the voice of the image on your screen. When something lands for you, the fact that you're paying attention and you've watched this video to this point means you're tuned in to the message of your inner teacher who's talking to you. When something connects, when something lands, that's your inner teacher speaking to you and inviting you to listen. So I very much appreciate that you're listening, because you are. And that's amazing. That is what needs to happen. That's a beautiful thing. Everyone appreciates that you're listening to the call right now. Now we can take this a step further and do what our inner teacher suggests that we do, i.e., extend love, forgive the Son of God. What the ego sees as death is in fact freedom. It wants you to be afraid to forgive. It wants you to preserve your precious individuality that we work so hard to define and defend in the world. We work so hard to brand ourselves and to categorize ourselves and to label ourselves as one thing or another. And we defend this effort that we've heaped into nothing, really. We could choose to see this differently, and the ego does not want you to do that. It wants you to be deadly afraid. It wants to convince you that to forgive the Son of God is death and oblivion and destruction. It's not death. It's not oblivion. It's not destruction. A very well-known idea from the workbook for students says, there is no death. The Son of God is free. There is no death. How can there possibly be if there's only God? Only God is perfect oneness. Beyond space, time, and all of our concepts that we cherish so dearly. Setting the ego aside is not death. It is freedom. It's not death. It's not doom. It's freedom. And we're invited to see it that way. So please entertain that idea. Your inner teacher would very much like you to entertain that idea and then listen to its guidance and go forth and forgive the Son of God. You'll have many opportunities today. In fact, you may be having one right now. So a couple words before we wrap up about skepticism on the path. I like it. And here's why. We're invited to question. Are we not? What is the spiritual path but an inquiry after all? You may be questioning what appears to come out of my mouth. You may be questioning this course. You may be questioning your inner teacher. You may be questioning Jesus. You may be questioning the truth and veracity, the authenticity of any spiritual teacher anywhere in any tradition. If you are, great, no problem. But don't stop with just that. Don't just stop with questioning the image on your screen. Keep going and be honest with yourself. Keep going and question the foundations of everything you now believe. Yes. What else? Question everything that you've assumed in this lifetime, everything that you've been taught in your upbringing by everyone and the society that you live in. Leave nothing to the side. Question everything. Don't hide certain little hatreds and little biases for certain people, like a political party that you disagree with, for example. Don't keep certain little grudges. Question everything, and don't stop questioning. That's very worthwhile. And in fact, in the workbook for students, Jesus invites us to do just that. Question the very foundations of everything you now believe. Should this engender fear, understand that it is the insane ego that's afraid. It rightly fears that you will set it aside because it's not worthy of you. And you will realize this at some point, and you will set it aside. How do I know that you will? Well, you might not do it in this lifetime. I mean, if you choose not to do it in this lifetime to spite yourself or to spite me or someone else, that's your choice. But Each and every one of us will do it in the end. Why? Because ideas leave not their source. We've never left God. That's how we can all say with 100% certainty that awakening is inevitable. So why delay? Really, why delay? I very much appreciate your being here and watching this video and the other videos. And I thank you for your subscription. Now, if you're just tuning in and you've not yet subscribed to this channel, here is the subscription button. That's the red arrow in the corner. And I'd love to have you join us. It is a very, very vibrant and growing international community here. And it should be, right? It's fun that we have the ability to connect with each other all over the world because most of us, let's face it, are not going to meet in person in this lifetime. And if we do, how cool would that be? It'd be really fun. But the reality is, we're all over the world, and it's a beautiful thing. And there are people that only you will be able to reach. And one of the ways you might be able to reach them is by asking questions here in this forum. I invite your questions and comments because spiritual inquiry should raise at times as many questions as it answers. Sometimes it feels like it raises even more, doesn't it? So if you've got questions, please feel welcome to leave them here. There might be somebody on the other side of the world that's wondering the same thing. And because you typed in the question and asked it, they will also benefit. So yeah, there's a lot of good that can be done in this way. Even if you're just making a comment to stop in and say hi, please do so. And I will see you again on the next video. Thank you for tuning in.